Most leaders have been told to tell better stories, but almost none have been told what a story actually does inside a human being. Author Unknown: Why Some Stories Change People and Most Don't. Hey, and welcome to another episode of Author Unknown, where we talk about all things story. Excited about our guest this week because we're going to get into not only his journey of authorship and with being an author and writing books and his background, but touching into the sales area specifically, which is something that is a sometimes unanticipated, unwanted area that authors have to deal with. And now we've got a true expert to sort of give us some advice in that world. So I'm going to throw it over to Jeff to introduce our next guest.
Ben Ward is our guest today, and this one I'm probably a little too giddy, Ben, to be honest, because Ben and I have known each other for quite a long time. We've worked together, we've collaborated together. He's one of my most favorite people on the planet. And I was thinking about this yesterday before I get into your bio, Ben, but I am huge about energy. And when energy attracts or, basically repels you, it does one or two things most of the time. It's going to, and Ben has that energy that when you are around it, you want more of it. And it becomes addictive because when I don't talk to Ben for a while, I'm like, I got to pick up the phone and call Ben because I need that energy that he brings in my life. But Ben has really coined the term, and this is the title of his very first book, which was called Sellership, which is the journey from being a top selling professional and moving into leadership roles. He has become the master of kind of training in that area, in that niche, which has helped so many sales leaders make that transition and becoming great leaders and entrepreneurs. Ben learned the hard way of what that meant. First, but before I get into all that, let me just go through his bio for just a minute. He has over 20 years of executive leadership and training and development. He's a sought after keynote speaker, leadership mentor, and strategic advisor. He has number one best-selling books, The Sellership, as I mentioned, and another book called Pluck the Fud, Fear, Uncertainty, and Doubt. But
I want to
he's
I want to hear you
also
say that three times fast, Jeff.
Pluck the Fud. It's a great book. And he also is now on the journey with his longtime mentor, Brian Tracy. They are writing a new book, and we'll get into that as we unfold this. But if you don't know Brian Tracy, he is back in 1985. It's really when he started to kind of take off, and through the 80s and 90s, become one of the most best-selling authors, keynote speakers, thought leaders of all time. Ben and him are really closely tied together. Brian wrote the book Eat That Frog, and he became really well known in the public speaking arena as well. He's written over 80 books and trained hundreds of thousands of people. But Ben, who is a phenomenal leader, he's also a consultant, helping entrepreneurs and business professionals in their sales and leadership, recruiting, retaining high performance sales teams. Now, Ben, on a personal note, he is married to his wife, Sherry, his longtime love, and she is the mother of their three children, and they are beautiful because they do not look like Ben. They look like Sherry. So that is a blessing to Ben. And they raised their family in beautiful Southern California in the San Clemente area. And you'll hear the story of Ben, but one of the things that he did is he became very successful in door-to-door sales, becoming one of the top door-to-door sales leaders of all time, really, which then led him to starting his own company that he built before the age of 30, where it was worth over $56 million. And the best part of his story, as he will tell you, is that after that, he lost everything. And so this fast track to success in his 20s, tremendous success, and then the experience of losing everything. And he'll unpack some of that for us today. But we're excited to have Ben Ward with us today from Southern California. Welcome, Ben.
Heck yeah, good to be here with you guys.
Right on. Ben, we've had a little pre-talk. Ben is with his book writing. He is just kind of a master of writing. When he and I were collaborating together, I remember when he was showing me his notebook of just pages and pages of all of the stuff in his brain. So we're going to get into the mind of Benny today, and it's a scary place to go for most of us, but for those who are going to be introduced to the way he thinks and what he thinks about and the way he moves people, is going to be a lot of fun. He's also written in Platt, who's a master storyteller. That Ben has written a lot in kind of the parable form in his books, which there's a real craft and mastery to that. He's also, because he's published several books, we're going to talk to him a little bit about that. But Ben, why don't you just kick us off a little bit and share with us a little bit of, the journey from your experience, going back to the day and really coming up through getting from kind of your experience, your success, your failures, to writing and starting your own company and writing your first book. Kind of maybe take us up to that point.
Yeah, thank you. So I'd say to start the big transition point, I learned how to sell. I in door to door sales. I was almost fired from a job that hadn't paid me a dollar yet, a straight commission job, and I just didn't sell anything. And they're like, "We can't keep you if you're not selling. Everybody else is selling." And so I ended up figuring it out, and then the next year I became in a leadership role, sort of assistant manager. The next year I was a manager, I was in charge, and I was just getting my teeth kicked in. And I'm like, wait a minute, like they should just listen to me. I know what they need to do. Listen, and um, it wasn't working, and half my team was quitting, and that happened for a couple of years, and they were blaming me, and my strategy was just to make fun of people that quit, and they don't have what it takes, and that became a very unprofitable strategy. Um, and and
Now,
so
how old are we? How Ben? How old were you at this point of your career?
24.
Okay, so young, yeah, I get
Yeah,
it. You're just like,
yeah,
come on, you either do it or you don't.
yeah. And so I started knocking doors in 2002 for a company called First Line Selling Home Security, and then by 2003 and 2004 is about this time, and it just hit me super hard. I'm like, you know what? I'm like, this is not working. I should just quit leadership because it's draining my energy. I would like, I'd make more money just going and selling personally. Almost like a last ditch effort. I joined in our company First Line. We had a leadership retreat, and the owners of the company hired Brian Tracy, just like the legend. He's like the all time at that time. He was the guy. He was the goat of all time. He had written at that time, like you said, Jeff, 80 books. By the way, now he's written 96. And
How
he's
how old
still
is Brian now? How old is he now?
he's like low 80s, like 82, 83, 84, somewhere right in there.
Yeah, yeah.
And and so the First Line hires him to come in to speak with the leaders, and he said something that just like hit me like a ton of bricks. And I'm just sitting there listening to him. He's like, "Listen, being good at sales and being good at leading a team are just completely different skill sets." And I'm just like, "Okay, yeah, yep." And he said it's a problem because it's the top performers that are the ones that get promoted into leadership, and then they struggle like crazy leading a team. And I'm just like, wow, like, like, is he like reading into my mind? Like, what the heck? And and then I'm just like, I'm like anchored in, and then he said a phrase that just kind of changed the course of my life. He said, anybody who's able to contribute in a meaningful way to bridge the gap in the canyon from high performing individual salesperson into high performing leader, champion of others. Anybody who bridges that gap will be making a huge contribution to the world. And I was like, what? That's like crazy. And it instilled that day a desire. I mean, I'm like, because he also would always teach, what one thing would you dare to dream if you knew you could not fail? And at that time, I'm sitting there, I'm just like, if I could dare to dream, I'm going to figure out how to actually lead. And then I'm going to figure out how to actually lead others and help others know how to lead. That was like my big dream. And when he
Now,
said
Ben,
that,
yeah, why was that? I mean, you had just experienced failure at that, and obviously you wanted to get better at it, but you're thinking about just getting out of it entirely. What was it that pull inside you? I mean, I look back and look at your career as like going, that was a pivot moment for you, that shift that's made you, who you are today. But What was it right then at that time? Why was that calling to you, do you think? Or have you ever like tried to recognize what that was about?
Totally. I felt deep inside I had the seeds of greatness. You know, I had enough confidence and borderline cockiness to be like, I can. You know, I didn't want to fail.
Right.
I can do this. Failing, it was a battle. It was a battle in my brain because like I don't need to be doing this. I can go make way more money and just go crush it myself. But I felt like that was the short game, and I wanted to play a long game for my life. I wanted to learn what it takes to actually influence and lead other people, not just beyond myself, right?
And then where did that moment take you then kind of from what happened next in that journey? Was that when you just started to kind of like take off in your sales and your recruiting? You just really dug in and figured it out? Or take us through that part to really start to bring the success to you?
Yeah, and so from there, I just was like, I just made a commitment, almost like a decision. The word decision, Jeff, you might have been the one that taught me this, but I from back in the day when we were rocking and rolling together. But the word decision comes from the Latin decidere, which means to cut off, and like, and so I like made a decision. I just like cut off, like I burned the boats on going back to selling myself and making more money that way, and I'm like, no, that's the short game. I'm playing a long game, and I cut off, and I went and I became obsessed on learning everything I could about leadership and applying it and taking it with my team. And through that, one discovery happened that was epic and is um, something that I attribute from losing half of my team every year to the year that I put this into play with my partner at the time, Jared Taggart, who he was the guy who recruited me. He was the manager. I was his assistant manager. I learned from him. He was phenomenal. Loved him. Love him now. He's been a huge mentor. And um, and Jared, I ended up going and we put these building blocks together, and he was a big piece of this. And we came up with 4 secrets of high retention that I teach to this day that are absolutely game changing. And what happened was when I applied these as in like trial and error, the year that we applied all 4 of these anchors and put them together, not one person quit our team.
And door-to-door sales, that is insane. For anyone
It's
who's been in that space, that is a
yeah.
turnover industry. Yeah.
Yeah, so it was revolutionary, and I attribute those pieces to the success I had where I continued on and I became the top regional in the door-to-door sales industry. And I earned my first $1,000,000 while I was in college. And that back then that wasn't a thing. But you know, today there's more people that have done that, but like that really shaped. And so just going head down and I, there's a key piece I got to tell you about this story. This There's a moment where I realized that making fun of people for quitting because they got put in the back of a cop car and they with handcuffs on, and then they call they call their parents, well, I'm in the back of a cop car, and then they quit the next day. And then me making fun of that person, be like, they just don't have what it takes. And like another person pooping their pants and like and they call me like, hey, you got to come get me. I drive them home. They're literally in
Wait,
the car, my
Jeff did
car.
not want you to share that story. That was very
Ah,
explicit. He did not want you to talk about it. Anyway, let's pretend that wasn't Jeff. Keep going.
ah. So he's sitting in my car, like not sitting on the seat because he's got pooped pants, and then he quits that day. Like, and I would make fun of these people, and I'd be like, dude, they just don't have what it takes. So here's the moment for me. And again, I'm committed to making this work. I'm like all in, and I'm like making this shift from like just you know like a individual high performer. I'd make fun of myself, like Ben, like, and so that was my strategy. But leading a team for me, what happened was I'm like I'm an idiot. This strategy of making fun of all these people, all like tons of people I spent a ton of money on to recruit. And I've invested my time, energy, and money. It was my largest, like, sunk cost. The revolving door. And I got pissed. And I looked at myself in the mirror and said, like, I'm the reason they're quitting. I already know. These people are going to go through these things. And like, I haven't been showing them. I'm under leading these people. And it wasn't until I got pissed and being like, no, that I started putting strategic anchors. And I created what I call the Oceanside principle, which is absolute power. That's one of the anchors of the four secrets. Then I started putting in a 10% bonus. I call it the 10% bonus that even anchors the Oceanside principle. Then I started doing final commitment interviews and getting very strategic on before somebody comes out to work with me, I take them under my wing and I guide them and I talk them out. Literally talk them out of the job. And I let them know, like, hey, listen, you know,
You know
it,
what's interesting, Ben, and just as I'm thinking with my story hat on as you're talking about this, um, it is, and we had mentioned this, we talked previously that I think people would be surprised how many uber successful individuals have gone through a severe loss, a severe trial, and not even the world did this to me, like self-imposed mistakes, bad choices, poor judgment, all of that. And we sometimes call it the wound. And that what's interesting from a story perspective, and it's gratifying to see you go there, is that I think there's a hesitancy sometimes for authors or thought leaders or leaders even to talk about sort of the wound, but it's actually that wound that you suffer, even self-inflicted, that becomes a catalyst for change. It becomes a catalyst for changing your worldview. It becomes right, and it's absent that there isn't that ability to sometimes shift in the kind of way that's necessary, like big kind of changes and shifts and things that are necessary. And what was fascinating to me is as you're talking about these individuals from in a cop car or having an accident in their pants while they're right, those are wounds, and to dismiss them because of that, you're actually taking away the opportunity that can be a catalyst in somebody's life, right? That can be the moment where they went and succeeded anyway. Like, talk about that a little bit, like as you've experienced that with the people you've led or yourself, like how important is it as you tell your own story to own that wound and be willing to share that with others.
oh man, I love it. What comes to my mind is somebody called me I, after I take him under my wing and like, listen, and he called me and he's like, Ben, dude, it happened. I'm literally out here drenched in sweat and like I have jock itch right now. Like it hurts so bad to walk. My legs are like, but he's like, you told me about this. And you like it's happening. I just wanted to like tell you. Cause part of what I would do is I'd sit him down and be like, listen, when you have jock itch, it's not like a matter of if. It's like you're going, it's just like you're just gonna hurt. You're gonna be chafed like crazy. Like that's when you know you're on the right track to what it's actually gonna take for success. And when that happens, you call me and we celebrate together.
Mm.
And getting that call, that my friend. Yes.
Ben, I absolutely love your anchoring moment. Is that one of the anchors of your four secrets? The jock itch anchor.
Uh, that's part of the Oceanside principle that I teach, and I have a
Yeah.
free master class that I give on that. It's absolutely golden. The four secrets of high retention completely changed my life. The principles from it are just crazy. And in fact, I shared like 3 of them with you: Oceanside principle, the 10% bonus, the final commitment interview. The fourth one is like by itself the most like brilliant strategy of retention that that works on the street, that works in real life. And they call it the sunblock video. And um, anyway, so you can get all that info. I give that stuff. I actually give that stuff for free right now. I probably won't for much longer, but
So Ben, you had that was kind of your pivot moment of change. You, the man in the mirror, faced the brutal reality. You made a shift and a pivot, and that led you obviously to great success in your sales, and then starting your own company. Seeing that fail, maybe you can share a little bit of like the journey of like going from that to your own company, and then the learnings you had in that failure of that company. As kind of a second moment in time that was a major shift for you, and then we'll get into your process for like the launch into your, the writing of your book and some of your thoughts and theories on and practices on that as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, well, we're going to the deep end. You guys good with that?
Yeah.
Let's go. We're diving in.
Yeah.
No
And
floaties on. No nothing. We're
no
all in.
floaties on. And this might get a little bit spiritual too. I don't know if you guys are all right with that.
Absolutely,
I
Ben. Take us.
yeah, bring it.
So I'm sitting there. Uh, Jeff kind of gave my background a little bit. My first 5 years, I worked for First Line, and then the owner of First Line and I, Wright Thurston, we started a company called Elevate, and we scaled that. We recruited 2,000 people, and we took that public. Looking back, it's easy to see hubris, and hubris is the pride that takes down sort of like the superhero. And not to like think I was a superhero by any means, but I had a 10-year track record of just crushing it, and um, kind of had a hot shot. Like my friends that knew me probably wouldn't think I was a big punk, and like a super prideful jerk, but in my heart, I like I was just a freaking man. And I'd earned millions of dollars at this point. Took my company public, and I, built large organization. I just sort of thought everything I touched was going to work. And so I started making some reckless business decisions. And it's really embarrassing to tell you guys, but I, I thought that operations was just like the easy thing, and like I didn't value operations. Um, and and I it's sad to say, but basically we just recruited like crazy, sold like crazy, and it's like a tree where the branches outgrew the trunk and the core and the operating system, and we just didn't invest in it the way we needed to, and we sold, way over recruited, and our tree just ended up and so ended up ultimately destroying. I destroyed my tree after a couple years after we'd gone public. So here we are. This is where it gets a little bit. This is the most valuable lesson I've ever learned, actually, in my entire life. And I've learned some lessons. I've written my book on Pluck the FUD, how to overcome fear, uncertainty, and doubt. I've created the sellership, brand, the sellership system, which is just super powerful. But this, this is actually a book I've been working on for 15 years that I've not written yet, that I'm writing constantly. I thought I was going to publish it um, in 2023 instead of Pluck the FUD. Something kept me from it, so I did Pluck the FUD first, and then I battled cancer for 18
That's
months,
right.
and then I'm like, oh, that's why I haven't published, because I have a lot more to learn in this book that I'm working on. So here's the lesson I want to share with you guys. I'm sitting there in a place that I call Black Death, where over a 6-month period, my company went from thriving to everything was unraveling, and our operations just just like blew apart. And through my recklessness, I was one of those two founders of the company, and we were both really good at sales and recruiting. And anyways, everything's unraveling. I start putting everything back into the business, trying to make it work. Every single dollar and more. Took out debt. My house, this point of Black Death, sitting at the very bottom. My home was foreclosed on. My car's repossessed out of my driveway, because a year earlier I could have paid it all off cash, but I was like, that'd be stupid. You're not gonna do that. Like, why would you pay your house or your cars off cash? That's dumb. Like, invest it. So that thinking, and I'm sitting here, Black Death. We couldn't make payroll, and I'm losing everything, and everything is coming to a very end, like, for me. And there's a lot of levers I pulled all the way down, like, oh, it's okay because this, we'll figure it out. Oh, I've got this back door. And basically, there was no back door. And I hit the very bottom, and I was pissed at God. I'm
Ooh.
like, I'm a good guy doing good things with a good company, and you've let me just hurt all these families, mine as well. And And, you know, my favorite scripture from the Bible is when in Matthew chapter 11, where Jesus is like, "Come unto me, all you that are heavy laden, I'll give you rest, and take my yoke upon it. It's easy. My yoke is easy." In the last four words, my burden is light. And I was mad. I'm in Black Death, and I'm just like, this is not light. This is heavier than I can possibly bear. And you've abandoned
And
me.
Ben, I think that experience right there it is much more common, I think, in every human, whether we all believe in the exact same God and interpretation, it doesn't matter. It's the anger of our creator, the universe, God, in our lives that I think everyone has when they're in that suffering, not pain, but suffering, then the blame goes to that when it's so out of you, when you feel like it's so out of your control. And appreciate you sharing that because that is absolutely real. It's human for every single one of us to hit that point. And so as you hit that and you refer to that scripture, that verse that kind of comes to your mind, like it is not light. What was it that gave you like the strength?
So this is what happened. And I'm just like pissed, right? And I'm like, this is not light. And I felt entitled to having this burden be easy for me. And it wasn't. I wanted to end my life. And I wanted to, anytime, like during around that time, something, if I heard about somebody that passed, I'm just like, man, they're so lucky. And and
That's an
and so I'm
awful
sitting,
place to be. Yeah.
yeah, when I'm sitting there, and um I learned that my identity was really tied to my success. And so since my success was gone, that my identity was gone. And that was a really hard thing for me to realize about myself.
I think most men are like that. Like, I think
Yeah.
men really suffer from that issue.
So at my maddest point, I'm sitting there and I'm just ticked off at God, and then a little gift came into my life, and it was just a little whisper into my heart. It's like, Ben, y- you're missing it. You're missing it. My burden is light does not mean what you think it means. And I'm like, huh? And I had this flash in my brain, a vision, a flash where and I saw the back of maybe of Jesus just like carrying a cross, but something was
Mhm.
different with that cross. This flashed in my brain, and the cross was not wooden. It was illuminated, the brightest light, and my burden is light. Then all of a sudden I had this flash of thought of my burden is light, as in
Love that.
enlightenment. And I'm just like, and I see this cross, this flash, and I'm just like, wait a minute. And it was, my burden is benefit. And I'm like, and I remembered that, like, Jesus, his cross put him into the ground, killed him. And like,
Mhm.
this is killing me. But I'm not dead yet. And I'm like, my burden is benefit. My burden is enlightenment, knowledge, experience, which I believe is part of what we're here on this earth to gain. And I just had this major shift in my paradigm from being entitled to having it be easy and comfy to shifting to, Ben, your burden will turn directly into benefit to you to the degree that you let it. And from there, it just completely shifted. And it actually, that thought made my burden actually feel less heavy too. Cause I'm like, oh, this is not going to get easier. Nobody's going to come save me. This is not like I'm not going to be rescued. That this will serve me if I let it.
You know,
Ben, yeah, go ahead, Platt.
well, I mean, you fire off so many things as I'm thinking about story, and so I one thank you for sharing because it's I think you feel what happens when someone's vulnerable, when someone's honest. That's not the easiest thing to share. Like those are not. I mean, you're almost tentative. Like I hope I can share this kind of thing with you, right? And I get it, but but doing that is essential in storytelling. And I had a couple like editorial pieces that may be instructive to other writers is just looking at your example. So a couple things that is sort of hitting for me is one, that what makes something meaningful is not the facts around it. Facts are facts. And you have in your glove box, I always talk about this, in your glove box in your car, you have a book of facts, every fact you could possibly ever want to know about your car, right? And so it's there, but it's not meaningful. For something to be meaningful requires two things, requires conflict significant enough to drive change and that's significant enough to spark emotion. And I think you can see as Ben is telling the story, like obviously he's pulling on those levers hard, right? So it's not just that he's telling the story and you could lay it out as a, here's in this date and in this date and in this date, right? It could be this factual tell, but what you're hearing is that what's making it meaningful is because he's being vulnerable about the conflict, what and why the stakes are so high and what it mattered, and then also because it was driving real emotions, right? And so these are part of sort of you're unpacking, like looking under the surface of storytelling, like you're just doing this naturally. And what's interesting is uh, just because sometimes I'll work with authors who are like, I don't have that life story. Like, I'm amazed at people that do that. I have kind of an intellectual interest in an area. I don't necessarily have a life that's gone through that level of disruption and change and conflict. And so, does that mean I don't get to tell stories? And the answer is yes, you need to. No, that's not the answer. You get to tell your story. But that it's there are different strategies you can use. And this is my big segue into why you're telling parables, for me anyway, because you can be a character in your own story. You can share your wound. You can make it public, right? That can be part of it. But you can also create that character in others, whether like Atomic Habits, which every chapter sort of opened with a story, wasn't the author's story, right? These are stories of other people, but going through these sorts of big moments. So you can gather those together that are illustrative of your point, or you can go down the total creative path and create parables and draft characters that are actually representing some of these abilities of us to sort of follow along in their journey and put them into circumstances that create meaningful conflict. So I know that was me talking a lot and editorializing about your story, but I would love to get into your choice of parables a little bit and talk about that. But I just want to make sure I'm not stepping on Jeff if you wanted to bridge something before we get into that topic.
No, I think that's a perfect segue. And I think the reason why this interview, this podcast to me was so relevant to our listeners is because of his experiences. And we're not even going to, we could spend another half an hour unpacking the whole experience with his cancer diagnosis and overcoming that. But Ben has been through some really, self-inflicted and outside inflicted challenges, but it's his reaction in taking and being open to those nudges inside to say, shift your thinking, pivot your thinking. And that battle inside each of our minds and our hearts and our emotions, and actually be able to have the umph or the chutzpah to get up and change something. And when we change, this is what I love about Ben's story is he changed as a human being. And oftentimes we look at our habits and our historical behaviors and we think, well, this is just the way I am. And the reality is we can make that pivot and shift at any time. And it's that choice, it's that decision that he goes back and talks about. Yeah, but let's jump into your writing of your first book and then Pluck the Flood and now your next one. Kind of this the idea of why you took the parable approach. What was that journey like? And then we'll play around with that for a bit.
Yeah, thanks. I think to segue into that, Jeff, um, making the change. So for me, my situation didn't change overnight. Like it took a lot of years to get out of that. But what helped me was anchoring every day to that thought of, hey, like it's like Napoleon Hill talks about in his amazing book Think and Grow Rich. Every failure brings with it the seed of an equivalent advantage. And so what are we doing to water the seed? And it took a long time it took me, I was in millions of dollars of personal debt. And I decided not to file bankruptcy, and I paid back people that I owed money to because I and my identity. And so like making the change might sound nice and fancy and easy, but like it was gut wrenching. And so I do have to tell one final piece to that story, to serve our audience here, because this is what happened is I fixated. I'm like, that visual that I had in my brain, that vision, the back and the I'm like, I have to like bring that to life. And so what I did was I tried to find something that looked like the vision I saw in my brain. There was nothing. So then I hired several different artists to try to create it for me. And and uh, after 8 renditions and several artists, this is as close to the thing as I saw right here. For those that are watching, I don't know if you're watching or not, but there's a picture of an illuminated cross, and I had this digitally created, and it's the closest thing that I can that I to what I saw. And then here's what I did: is I took that and I did a big giant painting of it, a digital painting, and this is my closet right now. Is a picture of that cross illuminated in my closet that I look at every single day to remind me that my burdens, the things that are really hard, will turn into benefit in my life as long as I don't quit, as long as I keep going and keep pushing, keep striving. And that, my friend, is what got me through that just devastating Black Death time period of my life.
Love it. I'll one more piece just because everything you're saying is so powerful, Ben. But I think there's often a misunderstanding with, particularly in the corporate world, with stories, and it's the sense of there has to be success in the outer goal, right? Like the story that I need to tell is winning the client, winning the deal, putting the $1 million in the bank, right? That those are the powerful stories. But the truth is, and if you think about the movies that have probably moved you the most, very often the outer goal is failed and it's the inner goal that changes. And so you've mentioned identity several times, and that's kind of the difference. Like if you think of a movie like Saving Private Ryan, for example, where really the idea of everybody coming back and surviving and bringing this soldier back, they all die, right? Literally, Ryan's the only guy that comes back, and at the end, he's asking, "Was it worth it? Have I lived a good life? Like, have I lived up to that thing?" That so I just shot a little bit of a light on that to say that there is real power in owning a story that's a failure on an external goal when it creates meaningful change. And often that change is either identity, it's your belief about others, it's your worldview, or it's your sense of agency. And when that catalyst changes, and then I think what you end up seeing is that core inner belief changes, that actually drives different changes in behavior. And then you start on a different kind of goal and a different kind of journey. And then all of a sudden you're starting to succeed. But it needed that pivot internally. And so I just note that as such a powerful but often underutilized story to tell because it just feels misaligned in much of the corporate world. And we talk about leadership and goals and all that. We just don't tell those stories very often.
And Ben, thank you for sharing that. That is so powerful, absolutely meaningful. Thank you for being vulnerable enough to share, open up that. That's really cool.
You're
Yeah,
welcome.
and again, Jeff, for being vulnerable, for allowing the poop story to be shared, because that takes courage too, and I don't want to undermine that. I want to salute you for that, Jeff. That
Yeah,
that
this is our
takes
last
courage.
episode together, Platt. That's all
and, this-
right.
and these are how podcasts die.
Yeah.
That was not Jeff's story, as far as I know. I guess I don't know facts either way. I'm assuming it wasn't Jeff's story. But hey, let's talk about parables a little bit, because it's one my favorite definition of a parable is a story that has never happened but always does. What do you think of that, Ben? As you think about the parables that you've written, this has never happened, but it always does. Is
Yeah,
that it?
I really like that. My first two books are a parable about leadership and leadership journey, and they're all the names of the characters are all my family members and closest friends. And so I love what you're saying about a parable is a story that's never happened but always does. And what I did is I created uh, uh, my own stories within the characters that didn't actually experience it, but it was stories from my life I wanted to teach, and I just put different characters. And so, it, your definition just is interesting. I'm gonna have to think about that. It's pretty
Yeah.
awesome.
I wish it was mine. I stole it from somebody somewhere that was smarter than I was. But I do love it, in the same way that one of my favorite definitions of fiction is truth telling through lies. So,
Ah,
but so talk a little bit about you made this decision to write these parables. You created these characters. Kind of how did you were you inspired? Was there books that you read? Was it like the Five Dysfunctions of Team, or Who Moved My Cheese, or was there something like that you had encountered, or where did the idea come from to do this?
yeah. So I love my hero book was The Go Giver, from
Mm,
and and I love those stories, and I love Robin Sharma. Um, his books about leadership without a title, and like those, and they're just these stories. And then I also yeah, so I was gravitated to that. And then my co-author Greg Reed, who's incredible entrepreneur, human being. He's the founder of the Secret Knock, which Forbes calls the the most effective networking group in the world.
mm.
And it's just this. He was the founder of that, and I got connected with him, and so we wrote it, and we brought in Brian Tracy to do the forward, and we decided to do it in parable form to make it just easy for people to ingest, and then pack it with relevant information and knowledge and tools and skills within a story. And that's how that came about.
And how has been as you shared that? I'm curious because one of the things I find when you write parables, and I've written a couple um, for different authors in different scenarios, but that the reader experience is a little different, because what the parable does, and this is very much like talking about the Bible, right? The function of a parable is it invites you into co-creating meaning, right? So it's not, because it's not literally true, these aren't literally characters, these none of these things really took place in the real world, but they are close enough to events that you recognize, to people that you've dealt with, to situations that you've faced, that it allows the reader to just insert themselves into that story. Have you listened? Have you heard that feedback from others? And or talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, that was strategic. We wanted people to be able to read it and just, I mean, see themselves in it. And Brian Tracy always talks about if anybody wants to learn a lifetime of knowledge on how to write a book, Brian Tracy. Actually, I went to dinner with him 17 years ago, and he said something at that dinner. That was one of the first times second or third times I met him at Ruth's Chris in Salt Lake. He's like, hey, I've been working on my, like everything that it takes to write a book. And he's like, I've done 80 of them at that point. And he's like, I've learned a thing or two. And honestly, it just went in one ear, out the other. I'm like, well, and until like fast forward, like 12 years later, I'm just like, wait a minute. I remembered, like Brian said, that he put his life work into what it's going to take to write a book. So the system that he had, he can share it. I'm just like, I'm an idiot. I didn't like bang his door down that night. And I'm like, so I like couldn't sleep. I like went to research, like, did he put the program out? And luckily he did. And, and it was like $1,000 at the time. And like, my point is this, is that, he said something, and he said a book that is easy to read is hard to write.
Mm-hmm.
And so when we're thinking about sellership, we're like, we want this to be so easy to read. It's got to be so easy to read for a fourth grader that could read it and be like, oh, and like, and so the story became the vehicle to help make it very easy to read, the parable. And I love your definition, the story that never happened but always does. And we took little flavors and elements. And you're right, if you look through every single story within Sellership, the first book, they didn't exactly happen that way, but they're so relatable to real life things, inspired by real life situations that people can put themselves in. And so a couple tips from that rant. You want to download Brian Tracy's How to Write a Book. You can get it online. I think it's like $400 right now. It's worth every penny. If you're writing a book, do not like fade that. Invest that money to learn from the best people on the earth, on the planet, who've put systems together to help you. So I went through that like 12 times over the course of the year as I was writing my first book. And I also joined a mastermind with Josh Steinley, who was all about first-time book writing. And it's called Published Authors. And I joined that, and I paid. It was expensive. Actually, it was crazy. I shouldn't even say out loud how much I spent. I'll tell you, 30 grand. And I'm just like, but like, who has, like, you don't need that. You can actually get the manual for $100. I would recommend that to everybody. And just like, who has already done what you're doing? And then you've got Platt and Jeff here, rocking and rolling with this authors unknown, beautiful work that they're doing to help serve. What I'm trying to tell you is learn from people, extract the knowledge, and get to work and just get started. But there's lots of resources out there.
That's awesome.
And we're free.
Yeah,
that's amazing.
Yeah. But and the other piece to this, which I wanted to pick your brain, because this is the other sort of, I think, unanticipated career path for authors, is that very quickly they realize the job doesn't end when their book is written. It actually kind of just starts. And as hard as a book is to write, and for many people it's very hard, it doesn't really hold a candle to what it takes to sell and market and put it yourself out there. Can you talk about, as you've lived this world, you're an expert in this world, and I know there's different strategies and different spectrums and genres and things, but what would kind of be your advice to someone who just thinks, okay, I got to sell myself? Like, really? Like, what do I even do? And how did Ben do this? How did you get the word out? Like, what do I do to market myself in this world?
Yeah, first of all, you're reading the younger version of myself's brain. You're reading my mind, because I remember Brian was like, hey, this is the easy part. And then Greg Reed, same thing. He'd written 30 best-selling books at that point. Greg Reed, I think he's up to like 60 or 70 now. But they both were just like, listen, this is the easy part. And honestly, I've rejected it. I'm like, I know you guys are wise, and I trust you in a lot of things, but no, this is the hardest part. Like, honestly, that's what, because it was hard, like taking the ideas and forming them and putting them in and work. It was like wrangling a bowl, like, and getting the it's um I can't really pretend to know this analogy, but like for the female authors out there that maybe have born children, it's probably a lot like that where you're like getting this baby out of you and like how hard that is because it's just like so
I don't think the women are going to say writing the book is the same thing, but that's a good analogy for us right here. We
I
agree. It's
I
got
will
to be
say
just as hard.
it's not the first time I've heard that analogy, and I also say I'm not even gonna step up to that and act like I have any expertise, but I've heard that before. So anyway,
Yeah, it's like one of the ways I can relate with my wife. I'm like, "Babe, I can't relate with what you've gone through, but, like, this is my own birthing
Yeah, I
experience.
know. Yeah, I
Giving
got it.
birth to this book has been, like, just a tremendous couple years of extreme pain." It's it's a pain that, if you're an author or if you wanna be an author, it's something that like, you're called for. Like, you're like, "Dude, I've got to write." And that's what Brian actually in his Brian's advice is like, don't force it. If you don't, like, want it bad enough, like, don't force it. Being an author that, like, it's not for everybody, but if you have something that you feel like you need to share, you can and if you feel like you cannot not write, that's your call. And take that by the horns and stop BSing yourself and get to freaking work one day at a time, 1 minute at a time, 1 hour. And so it's a hard process. And so don't kid yourself and be like, oh, it's gonna be easy. And in today's world, my first two books were done before any sort of AI, like before Chat GPT or like, and so, here's the thing, you've got resources to help you, but you better be careful because those you'll have some of the worst results you can imagine, like trying to have AI create your book for you. You know,
mhm.
it it will amplify your voice that you already have or that you're shaping. It will help amplify, but it will destroy. It will destroy any message that you really think you want to share with the world if you're not very wise and careful in how you use AI.
Right on, Ben. Well, we have absolutely loved your time on this show. We didn't even get into the fact, with your masterminds and your surfing abilities and your ping pong mastery, which I know you're just a phenom on ping pong. But this has absolutely been a joy, both vulnerable and insightful, and the journey of which you've been on for the last 20 plus years has been really remarkable, Ben. We appreciate your time and your energy more than anything, and your authenticity and willingness to be that vulnerable with us on our podcast, Author Unknown.
Thanks, Ben. Thanks to my co-host Jeff, and thanks everyone who tuning in this week to another episode of Author Unknown.